So this is, now we're going all the way back to Census 2000, and I'm showing this for two reasons. One, this is the brilliance of census. This is the only data source where we could do a map like this to kind of give you some sense of where there are high concentrations of at least a sub-portion of the LGBT population, in this case same-sex couples. But the other reason I'm going to show you about this is when we lump LGBT and potentially T as a demographic, there's a danger there because, as you saw in past ones, 60 or 70% of that group is white. And so when we think about it as a demographic, we have to be really careful. What you're capturing here is the geographic patterns of white people in same-sex couples. Because if I do this map with African Americans, that's what it looks like. It's a completely different map. So that's African Americans in same-sex couples. And what that's a map of is where African American people live in the United States in high concentrations. And what that tells you is that, and then this is the map for Latinos and Latinas. So what that tells you, there's a couple things, and this pattern works at a national level. It works, if I showed you the same maps of LA, African Americans and same-sex couples live in South LA, and Latinos and Latinas and Asians and Pacific Islanders live in East LA. It follows the patterns of the population. So if you're trying to survey the LGBT community in Los Angeles and you set up a booth in West Hollywood, you're going to get rich white gay people. And if you want to find the whole LGBT community, you have to go into these communities of color. That's where LGBT people of color live. They largely do not live in gay ghettos. And quite frankly, if you did this for male and female, you would see a different map too. And particularly on city levels, women don't live in gay enclaves. They live around them. So if you think about, I mean, right. So, but if you, and you know, anybody who lives in D.C., for those of you who know D.C., you know, DuPont Circle, Logan Circle, Capitol Hill, that's where the guys live. The women are in Tacoma Park, all around the edges are the high concentrated areas. And that pattern exists in most cities as well. So all by way of saying is that it's a caution to people doing policy work or doing programmatic work to just constantly keep in mind that what's dubbed as gay is often white, male, and rich. And that's one of the reasons why that stereotype remains. And we need to be much more kind of cognizant of that. There's this notion that gay people don't couple, except that 3 surveys here show that the portion of lesbians who are in a same-sex partnership is about the same as the proportion of all women who are in a partnership. It's 2/3. That's roughly equivalent to women's rates of being with a male partner. It is lower in men, but it's still half. So it's, you know, coupling and partnering is much more common, I think, than many people think. Poverty is, we've talked about this already, is a serious problem. In the National Survey of Family Growth, 15% of men who identified as gay were in poverty, almost 1/4 of lesbians, and 1 in 5 children being raised by same-sex couples in the 2000 census were living in poverty. And you see this in receipts of public assistance. They're higher for both male and female couples. This is 2009 now. They're higher for both male and female couples than for people in different sex couples. They're dramatically higher for couples who are raising children. So why all this difference for couples raising kids? Well, one of the things is the source of the children. It turns out that conditioned on having a child, I now have 2 surveys that are very suggestive that conditioned on having a child, lesbians and gay men and potentially bisexuals have their first child earlier than heterosexuals. And what this suggests, so you know, for heterosexuals in the survey on the left there, sorry, I didn't mark the surveys. The survey on the left is the General Social Survey. The survey on the right is the California Health Interview Survey. For heterosexual men, their first child was at age 25. It's almost 4 years younger for gay and bisexual men. And in the CHIS, this was only asked of women. For heterosexual women, 22% had had their first child before age 20. For lesbian women, it was 27%, and for bisexual women, it was 43%. So they're having their kids at an earlier age, and what it is they're having their kids before they're, my sense is they're having their kids before they're open about their sexual identity, and they're probably doing it in heterosexual relationships. So here is one interesting difference, which is that child rearing is dramatically higher among racial and ethnic minorities in gay and lesbian people. And in this case, this is people in same-sex couples, although this has been observed in some other surveys that include single people. The rate of child rearing among African American women in same-sex couples is 50%. That's about the rate of child rearing in African American women, period. In other words, sexual orientation does not affect the probability that an African American woman will have a child, which is, I think, again, very different than our preconceived notions. And it's higher for men. For men, it's only 8% in white men, it's 26% in African American men, and 24% in Latinos. So it's more than double. And that's one of the reasons why you see these kids who are in the kids of same-sex couples in economic distress. Many of them are racial ethnic minorities who are in fact economically disadvantaged. So this is educational attainment. For people in same-sex couples who have less than a high school degree, their rate of child rearing is no different than people in different sex couples, for both men and women. And there's not much difference between men and women. The split in becoming less likely to have children is among people who have higher education levels. So again, indicative of this pattern of, I argue, having your kids earlier in life. This is where parenting is most common in the United States. The states where same-sex couples are most likely to be parents are Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. The metro areas, the top 3 metro areas where same-sex couples are most likely to raise children are San Antonio, Texas, Jacksonville, Florida, and Raleigh, North Carolina. Same-sex couples who parent don't live where same-sex couples live, in high concentrations. They live in sort of more rural areas, less kind of gay-friendly areas, more conservative areas. So now I just want to show you.
Which one is the loudest soccer mom? That's what I'd like to know.
Good job, Mike.
At the soccer field, there are 2 moms cheering for the same child. But in church, Letitia Bynes and her partner Misty Gray of Jacksonville, Florida, are part of a new face on the old Bible Belt. Same-sex couples raising children, turning to pro-gay churches for support and acceptance.
Okay, we're gay, we're lesbian, but our God still loves us, no matter what.
A surprising UCLA study of the 2010 census reveals same-sex couples in the South are more likely to be raising children than similar couples even on the West Coast. San Antonio is number 1, number 2, Jacksonville. It took 1 phone call to find out why. Why is this happening in the South of all places? Gay and lesbian people tend to come out.
It's my backyard.
They're actually more likely to have children from a prior relationship earlier in their lives. Demographer Gary Gates cites another big reason: Southern pro-gay churches reaching out to minorities and creating safety nets for the entire family. Of course, not all churches are happy to hear about this trend. This, in fact, is one of them here in the Jacksonville area. The leader of this church is calling on pastors all over the city to pray.
I believe that they should be preaching a positive message that Jesus is right.
And that these couples, they should not have gay relationships?
I believe that the couples in the church should have a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ that would bring a conviction that Jesus taught in scriptures teach that marriage is between a man and a woman. Simple.
But not so simple for people like Letitia Bonds, raising her 3 biological children with her partner, Mr. Gray.
Hetero, homo, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Either way.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great support system.
Today.
And their pastor believes happy parents start with happy children. The focus is the children.
Yes, absolutely. The children being able to serve God with their families and not being judged.
It wasn't too long ago that gay and lesbian couples might have thought it was too risky to bring their children to church with them. This Jacksonville church was firebombed 3 times back in the 1980s. Now it is a place for family worship and youth groups, signs of the times, and a changing Bible Belt. David Madigan, CNN, Jacksonville, Florida.
So, you know, that's not Modern Family. And, you know, virtually every image of that is not an image we normally see. People of color, people in a religious community, gender nonconformity, all of those images in there are something we don't see that much, and yet they're so prevalent in these statistics. That's a constant frustration of mine. So to wrap up, I just want to say, that said about same-sex couples and child-rearing, the truth is adoption and other means are definitely higher in same-sex couples. So 10% of same-sex couples have an adopted child compared to less than 4% of different-sex married couples. We estimate that there's about 65,000 adopted children who have LGBT parents and 14,000 foster kids. So why do I think it's important for data inclusion? Obviously, I want to inform these debates with facts, not anecdotes. I want to challenge stereotypes, and I want to increase I want more of those CNN stories to show this kind of aspect of the community. And finally, for my own self-serving reasons, I want to have my picture next to Alfred Kinsey in a paper of all things in the UK. So I will stop there. Thank you. Evan, I think I went longer than I was supposed to.
Not a problem. That's right. So I was originally invited by Gary and Brad to, I think, basically be the co-pilot who gets to nap during the whole flight while Dr. Groves and Gary do their thing, and then Dr. Groves dropped out. So Gary invited me today to be tough on him and play devil's advocate and stir the pot up, although I think with customary Gary Gates and Williams Institute thoroughness, you really covered everything that possibly could be said, and it's going to be a strain to come up with tough things. So before I do, I actually want to just flag the moment where you got gasps, I think, from this audience. And that was with the maps where you showed us really, in a very dramatic and compelling way, the difference that the data presentation, not in a artificial or overstated category or a familiar category, but really honing in on particular data, and we saw the difference if you focus on African American or if you focus on Latino as opposed to the general category. So I just want to invite you, if there's anything more you'd like to say about that, what lessons should we, as advocacy organizations, as individuals telling stories and so on, what can we take from that, and what's the Williams Institute going to do also to take that gasp reaction we all had here and get that out there to the American people?
Well, I think one of the things that advocacy groups have to do is to be a little more careful about the imagery they use, and also perhaps to who they kind of who they kind of present as the image of the community. And that CNN story was prompted by, it was a front page story on the New York Times that prompted that story. Evan, I am delighted to say, was one of the very few gay, kind of prominent gay people out there who actually cited that story in a blog. The silence in the LGBT media after that story came out was deafening.